doctor.
So, can antiperspirants and deodorant cause breast cancer? The simple answer, no. These concerns were started by an email hoax, despite the fact that there is no convincing scientific evidence to support the rumor. It is false. Phew, would have been a rather smelly society if it was true. Our question for the week via Facebook comes from Maria, who asked, is something like colon cancer hereditary? Maria, the answer is yes. It's estimated that 5 to 10% of all colon cancers are genetic. But remember, there's no single cause alone. Aside from a family history, you also have a high risk of colon cancer if you're older than 60. Eat a lot of red or processed meats, have polyps and inflammatory bowel disease. It's the 5th most common cancer in women, though not as common as cervical cancer. In South Africa, approximately 8 women die of cervical cancer every day. This cancer develops in the cervix, which is the low, narrow neck of the uterus. Cervical cancer is not hereditary. It's caused by a common virus called human papillomavirus, or HPV, and it's passed from one person to another through direct skin-to-skin contact during sexual activity. Up to 80% of women will acquire an HPV infection in their lifetime, and almost 50% of these infections will be with a cancer-causing virus type. So the most effective way to address cervical cancer then is through prevention, and there's a vaccine available to women that can reduce the risk of developing cervical cancer by up to 95%. Henny, who's at risk for developing HPV?
All of us. If we have skin-to-skin contact with other people, we can get the HPV virus.
Okay.
Fortunately, most of us will be able to clear that infection through normal immune mechanisms, but not all of us have that ability, and that's where the vaccine comes in, to prevent that infection altogether.
And so who should be getting that vaccine? Because obviously the focus has been on girls, not on boys.
Well, ideally all of us, to prevent HPV from spreading, but the most important group of people that should get HPV vaccine certainly are young girls before they become exposed to cancer-causing HPV infection. In order to prevent cervical cancer developing many years later.
And give me an age on that, Henny. What age? I've got a daughter of 9 now. Would she be eligible?
Ideally, we're looking at the ages of probably about 9 to 12. But older girls and even women much older than that can also benefit from the vaccine. But the most important group would be girls before they become exposed to human papillomavirus.
Can we touch on that briefly? So a girl that has been sexually active, would she benefit from getting the vaccine after that initial interaction?
Well, these vaccines are not therapeutic. In other words, they will not cure an infection, but they are preventing new infections. So if somebody has been sexually active, for instance, without getting an HPV infection, they may actually benefit from the vaccine. But the most important group, I just want to repeat this, would be young girls before they become exposed to the infection. And
they don't need to be screened for cervical cancer before the time at all?
No. We want to vaccinate the entire population. I would love the South African government to pay for HPV vaccines for every girl in South Africa to get human papillomavirus vaccines.
You and I both, which is fantastic. Henny, in terms of safety, these vaccines are safe, aren't they? And obviously, by definition, they are if you want everyone to be vaccinated, but just remind us.
We know that vaccines have developed significantly over many years, and we know that most of us have been vaccinated as children, and vaccines as a technology are usually quite safe. We don't recommend women who are pregnant to get the vaccine for obvious reasons, but in large studies across the world, there's not been shown to be any harm to girls, or if by accident somebody was pregnant, even to their babies.
Okay, but we don't recommend pregnant women get
no.
Yeah. So it's long-lasting, it's safe, and it is for everybody.
And it's effective.
Great. How many of our audience have actually had the HPV vaccination? None, hey? So
I think the problem with the HPV vaccine in South Africa, although it's been available in South Africa for quite a few years now, it is unfortunately still quite expensive.
Yeah.
And it's mostly available through commercial pharmacies. But I would like to see it as a national policy, a national program where all school-going girls get the vaccine on a government program, and that's the way to do it.
Great. Any of you got daughters?
I do.
And they're going to be vaccinated?
Certainly.
Or have been?
Certainly.
Wonderful. One of the most common arguments raised against administering a vaccine to girls to protect them from the human papillomavirus has been that it might encourage them to become promiscuous. But a recent study, as recent as October last year, has now shown that that's not a concern in any way. I mean, try to think of the vaccine as you would a bicycle helmet. It's protection. It's not an invitation for risky behavior. And for women that haven't had the vaccine, you know, their risk of getting cervical cancer is obviously higher than those who have. How do they prevent or bring that risk down?
Yeah, fortunately, there's a long period between getting the HPV virus and becoming infected and getting cervical cancer. There's a long time period that elapses in the development of cervical cancer. So we can intervene by doing a very common screening test called the Pap test, and most women will be aware of the Pap test. And that's a fantastic way of preventing cervical cancer in older women. And the South African government program allows each woman a free Pap smear every 10 years after the age of 30.
That's great. And you talk about Pap test and Pap smear, same thing?
Well, same thing, yeah.
Okay. So as Henny mentioned, the best way to prevent cervical cancer, if you haven't gotten the vaccine, is to do a routine cervical cancer screening. As you said, what you would know is a Pap smear. Figuring out when to be screened for this cancer can leave women's heads spinning somewhat. So up on your screen right now are the latest recommended guidelines for Pap testing. Henny, thanks again for your insight. Really appreciate it. Let's give our professor a round of applause.
I want to live the best life.